Hello, and welcome to the Pollinator Habitat How-To webinar series. And today we'll be covering the basics of native plant gardening. Sim is up next, and Sim will be talking about some of the non-plant components for our garden.
Thanks, Leslie, and good morning, everybody. Camille did such a great job talking about site selection and plant selection. I'm going to pick up where that left off and start by talking about some of I'm going to call it habitat infrastructure, but essentially this is anything that um, is going to provide some habitat value for wildlife. Quick introduction about myself. My name is Sim Barrow. I'm the Director of Community Conservation for Arkansas Wildlife Federation. Um, I have a picture here of an ebony jewel-winged damselfly, and it's one of my favorite insects here in Arkansas. Um, and I share it here because I have a background in entomology and wildlife biology. So I've been in the Arkansas area doing outreach and engagement for wildlife habitat and insect and invertebrate conservation for the better part of 15 years at this point. And so I'm excited to share some of my knowledge and experience, both hard-learned lessons from personal experience, as well as some excellent expertise that I've gained in the field through all the great relationships that many of which are here today, presenting as well. Um, so, a little bit about the uh, Arkansas Wildlife Federation. We're a statewide conservation nonprofit. We were founded in 1936. Our mission is to ensure a thriving future for Arkansas wildlife. And we do that through advocacy as well as community engagement and working to raise awareness about the needs of wildlife conservation in Arkansas. We are the independent state affiliate of National Wildlife Federation, which is one of the largest wildlife conservation nonprofits in the country. We are independent, so we are fully our own organization, but as an affiliate, we gain access to some really valuable support and resources from the National Wildlife Federation. And I mention that because the Certified Wildlife Habitat Program is one of our core community engagement programs, and it's a really special one because not only has it been in action for over 50 years across the nation, but also it's a really engaging way for the general public to welcome wildlife into their own spaces, whether that's a backyard or a community center or a place of worship. This provides a really good framework for helping to provide wildlife habitat wherever you are. I'll talk a little bit more about that here shortly, but I wanted to mention just real quick that when we talk about wildlife habitat in a backyard setting or in a residential area, we really are talking about four requirements. That includes, of course, food, water, cover, and places to rear young. I want to say now, just to kind of piggyback off of what Camille has said, uh, native plants provide a lot of this just by virtue of being present in an area, particularly food and cover and places to rear young. When we talk about pollinators like the monarch butterfly, milkweed and pollinator plants, wildflowers, nectar sources are, phenomenal ways to support those pollinators. But they by themselves do not provide the full scope of what wildlife need for habitat. And so, understanding that native plants are such an important part of this equation, I'm going to spend my time this morning focusing on uh, water and cover. And the reason for that is just because while there are often naturally occurring resources in these categories, for a lot of people, we have to provide them intentionally or artificially. And so we're going to talk about how we can do that, how to think about these things as you build better habitat in your backyard. Something I say at every single one of these presentations when we talk about gardening for wildlife. Uh, First of all, keep in mind it's a journey, not a destination. So it's really easy to see pictures like the ones, here on this slide of these beautiful, dense blooms of native wildflowers and think, "Ah, I could never make that happen in my yard," and that's okay. It's not all or nothing, so I want to add that as well. You'll get there, and it's amazing. One of the joys of gardening is seeing how things develop and grow with your care. And of course, progress over perfection. It's not something that happens right away. This is something that can take multiple seasons, multiple years. And honestly, I think that really deepens the value of the experience, not just for us, but for the wildlife that benefit from them. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about water for wildlife. Why do wildlife need water? Obviously, uh, they need water to drink or to bathe. And I love this picture of the ground squirrel, even though that is not an Arkansas native wildlife species. It's a good picture because it shows this insect off to the side that's also coming to probably access that water resource as well. So I'm speaking broadly for wildlife. A lot of times that means birds or other mammals, but I'm also speaking just as much for the insects, the pollinators, and other invertebrates that are, going to be accessing these resources. In addition to, drinking and bathing, some wildlife need water for reproduction and development. So if you want to support amphibians like frogs and toads or salamanders, or insects, aquatic insects like dragonflies and damselflies that spend at least part of their life cycle in the water, providing a suitable water source for those activities will be necessary. Some key considerations as far as how do we approach water, providing water for wildlife. One of the most important things to start with is how can I maintain that resource? A lot of people, that means having a bird bath or a water dish or a trough or something like that. It's important to be able to replace that water every day or two. Um, if obviously if you have a large water resource like a in-ground pool or something like that, it'd be hard to do that. But for like a bird bath or something like that, replacing that water every 1 to 2 days is a really important thing. Cleaning and sanitizing beyond just replacing the water, scrubbing that out every now and then is really important. And that's because, these become focal points for wildlife. It's a gathering place, and that also means that there's a risk of spread of pathogens. So making sure that you can keep it clean to reduce the risk of, disease spread in your wildlife population is really, really good thing to do. Also, safety and accessibility. So, if you don't want to make a water trap in your backyard, you want to make sure that your water resource is wide and shallow. Ask yourself, could a bird stand in that water if they needed to bathe, or if, maybe an animal fell into that water basin, can they get out? So, thinking about things like squirrels or rodents, frogs, toads, tree frogs, things like that. Also, putting it strategically near cover or a hiding place is good because, it's important for those wildlife to be able to escape danger to get that water. Otherwise, they may not feel safe getting to it. This is a little of a pro tip, I guess you might say. A lot of bird baths are elevated, and that makes sense. That gives the birds a good vantage point to watch for predators, but also it reduces who can access the water. A lot of wildlife can't get on top of something. So, if you want to support some wildlife that are on the ground, putting that water on or near the ground is a good way to do that. And lastly, for this, considering that we are in Arkansas in a really temperate area of the country, and mosquitoes are a near constant issue. There are a few things you can do to reduce the risk of mosquito breeding in your water resource. Uh, if you replace the water every day or two and clean and sanitize regularly, mosquitoes won't be a problem. However, if it's a type of a water basin that doesn't actually give you the chance to do those things, you can place an organic mosquito dunk in there that has a natural toxin that is, toxic to dipterans, to flies like mosquitoes and midges, horseflies, things like that, crane flies, but are not deadly to dragonflies or damselflies or other aquatic insects. So that's an option. Another would be to bleach soak with a couple tablespoons of bleach in the water when you're cleaning your water dish. Just leave it for 30 minutes or so. Some mosquitoes lay eggs on the sides of water basins, and when that water fills up, the eggs hatch. But if you soak that in bleach, that can kill those eggs and prevent them from hatching. Also, you can install a fountain or agitator that moves that water and helps to aerate it. It'll also break that surface tension and make it harder for mosquitoes or other aquatic insects to breed in that water. So we're going to look at a few examples of what water resources can look like. And I like to approach this with kind of like a no cost to low cost and kind of moving up the budgetary scale a little bit for how far you want to take the water. Again, it's one of those things where diversity of resources is really beneficial. So if you can provide more than one source of water in your yard, that's even better for wildlife. But I think it's good to start by asking, does your property have an existing water source? So, for example, if you're lucky enough to have a beautiful pond like this in your backyard, that is a fantastic source of water for wildlife. Maybe you live near a creek or stream or on a lakeside. Those water resources are, available to wildlife already. If that's the case for you, then one thing you can do is start thinking about how can I improve the water quality on that resource. And so that might mean, planting some wetland species of plants in and around that water resource, or maybe, adopting some water quality best management practices that reduce erosion and nutrient runoff into the water. Reducing your fertilizer and herbicide and pesticide use can do a lot for water quality if you're close to a water resource like this. So if you already have one, be thinking about how you might be able to improve the quality of that water resource through your work in your yard. If you aren't lucky to have something like that, like many of us are not, we can start with just the zero to low cost water sources. Here I have basically just the drain pans that you could buy with a pot. This one on the left, you might think, well, what good is a big old pile of mud for water? But for a lot of insects, especially for our native bees and wasps and other pollinator species, they use mud as a nesting material. And so putting out a mud dish is a way to do that. Also, if you've ever seen butterflies gathering in large groups, maybe on the edge of a creek or river, they're actually exhibiting a behavior called puddling, and that's where they're actually drinking that water, but in that water are dissolved minerals that they are needing. So it's a source of nutrients as well. So you can create a mud dish and watch the insects use it. Or you can, put some pebbles in there, create what's called a pebble tray. This is really useful for insects as well, as that water kind of wicks up the stones so they can get to that without risking falling into the water and getting trapped. If you want to do something like this and really support birds or other vertebrates, you could take some of the pebbles out and create a bathing spot for the birds. I will just say a little lesson I learned this year when I went to create one of these. I bought, your standard terracotta base, um, and the water lasts about 12 hours before it is absorbed into the terracotta and dries out. So that's not a bad thing if you want to do, refill it every day. But if you don't want to have to do that, I would recommend a more waterproof material for that. So moving on to some, medium cost or mid cost water sources, there's, I wish I had taken this picture of these two owls in a bird bath, but bird baths are a really good option if you don't have one already. The one I have is actually one I bought from Wild Birds Unlimited here in Northwest Arkansas, where I live. And what it does is it has a basin that sits into essentially like a permanent frame that's fixed into the ground. And so it's really easy to clean. I can just take that dish out, bring it inside to my sink, and use a brush and some dish soap, maybe some bleach to really scrub that thing and get it clean. And all I have to do is just take it right back out. So in 5 minutes or less, I can have clean, fresh water for wildlife. Whereas if you use more of like the traditional, concrete or permanent basin like this one here, you're going to need to do a little bit more work to clean it out just where it sits. Another good option if you have 50 to 100 or $200 is to install a rain barrel. This is a great sustainability practice for your home. And of course, I would not recommend just leaving your rain barrel open. It needs to be covered. That's a safety hazard, not just for wildlife, but also for people. And it becomes a really hard to manage breeding habitat for mosquitoes. But if with this one, you can see on the bottom there's a spigot. And so one way to provide water is to install a rain barrel like this, and then at the base, install a tray or a trough as your water basin, and then you can refill it pretty easily from that rainwater. So those are great resources if you want to invest a little bit more. And then, of course, my Cadillac water resource that I would love to have in my home is one of these in-ground water features. This is a really valuable resource, not just for drinking and bathing for wildlife, but this does become really great habitat for breeding for amphibians and other aquatic insects. And I love this because whoever did this one, it's probably not in Arkansas because they've planted some really cool pitcher plants. So maybe somewhere in like Alabama or Florida. But you can see there's a lot of opportunity for some unique plants to be planted in here. And you can also see very faintly, kind of towards the top left corner, this has a fountain component. So that's adding some water movement which also helps with aerating the water and again preventing some of that mosquito breeding in that water basin. So, just a couple of things to add the joy of adding water to your landscaping. You get to observe some really beautiful wildlife behaviors. And again, it becomes a focal point for all kinds of wildlife, including our native tree frogs, like the spring peeper on the bottom and the gray tree frog up on that bath. So, I really encourage you to make the effort to provide water for wildlife while you're doing this work to improve habitat. We're going to run through cover next. This is a really fun one for me too, because a lot of times it's just getting to know your landscape a little better is the first part of cover for wildlife. But why do wildlife need cover? How do they use cover? Of course, first they use they use cover to escape from inclement weather. It's a refuge. Um, it's also a way to find the right microhabitat for them. So, for some insects, the best microhabitat is the high humid interface between the bottom of a rock or a log and the soil. That's great cover for wildlife, but also shrubs and thickets and native plants serve as a really great source of cover. They not only are they providing that microhabitat or escape from you know poor conditions, but it's also a safe place to rest or do anything that wildlife needs to do when they're not out foraging. So they might be grooming, they may be reproducing, things like that. A cover provides the opportunity for those things. And of course, escape from danger for wildlife that's potentially predators, or it could be, if you're near a road or a street, that cover could provide a safe refuge from, traffic, things like that. I think it's also important to note that prey and predator both need cover. So when we provide native plants, we attract a lot of wildlife, but we also attract predators, and those predators need habitat too. So, I think it's important to remember that cover is also good for the entire food web, not just for our herbivores and pollinators. Some key considerations for providing cover for wildlife. It's important that it's close to other habitat resources. So, like I mentioned in the water section, um, it's better to provide cover near those resources. If you feed your birds, if you have bird feeders, then cover nearby enough that they can easily get away if they need to is really good. I also think cover is an opportunity to focus on biodiversity. So we're not just talking about the birds and the butterflies here. We're also talking about box turtles and toads and salamanders and rodents and all manner of other wildlife. So providing cover for that many different kinds of animals is a challenge, but also provides lots of opportunity for diversity. Some ways to think about cover is first of all, density. So, how closely or how, thick is your plant cover, your shrubs and your bushes and your thicket, things like that. How high is it? So, some songbirds are like sparrows. Like we have a lot of juncos and white-throated sparrows in my backyard right now, and they spend more time on the ground. And so low growing cover is really good for them. Whereas, for like yellow-rumped warblers this time of year or owls, they need cover up high. So if you have trees or snags, things like that, that would be a good source of cover for them. Shade and humidity. So if it gets, you want to have opportunities that for wildlife to get into the warmth of the sun, but also to escape the heat of the day. So providing cover with, some shade, some sun, some drier aspect, or more humid is good. And of course, size. How big? Is the cover, how much space is it taking up in your yard? That's another thing that's going to be a consideration both for you as you plant it and for the wildlife they're going to end up using it. So this is a beautiful example, I think, of a more messy native garden space. This is really great. I actually have a similar bed. It doesn't look this nice, but in my backyard, and earlier this spring, we had some robins that fledged on a nest in our downspout, just above where a planting like this was. And I have two dogs. They're big dogs, and they go in the backyard every day, multiple times a day. And I opened the door for them one morning, and they saw the fledgling robins on the ground under their nest and immediately ran to investigate. Thankfully, those robins were able to hide in the thick brush that the native plants had grown into. And my dogs were able to, or the robins were able to escape my dogs until I could get them inside. So this kind of cover is really valuable for a lot of wildlife, especially mitigating some of those conflicts that we might have. So starting out, where are your natural sources of cover in your backyard? Um, when I'm doing some of my yard work, a lot of times, instead of composting the branches and wood sticks that I pick up, I will just kind of throw them in a pile in the back corner, and that creates a good source of cover. If you have fallen logs on the ground in your yard or in your property, those are excellent sources of cover. And standing dead trees or snags, or even trees that have cavities in them, natural cavities. These are all natural sources of cover. And in these cases, it's just a matter of maybe supporting those by how you manage them, or, replenishing them as they break down. You could even bring in some logs from somewhere else and add them to your property if you so desire. Or if you're in a position to where you don't necessarily have abundant natural cover, or are in a situation where these kinds of things would not really be compatible with your other uses, you can add artificial sources of cover. So this one here on the left is Bee Hotel. You can buy these in a lot of stores. I will caution their needs. The insects that use these have some pretty specific requirements that may not be met by those, store-bought bee hotels. But with a little bit of research, you can find some of the requirements. I would say just briefly, the length and diameter of these stem tubes, these hollow spaces, is really important. Most of our native stem nesting bees are really small. And so I have found most of the ones that I put out, the smaller stems tend to get used more than the larger ones. It's also important to clean them out, keep them clean, because they can also become a reservoir for parasites and other pathogens. This rock stack might look familiar. This is part of that, in-ground uh, water feature, but those rock stacks, all those crevices and gaps are refuge, they're cover for a lot of small animals, and that includes spiders and insects and pollinators and lizards and frogs and all kinds of wildlife use these stacks. So if you have a garden bed, you could create cover just by creating like a stacked rock edging around that. It's going to look really attractive and it's going to provide a lot of valuable habitat. And then this little toad abode here that you can buy those at a lot of garden stores and things like that. And those are great. You can also make your own just by taking a terracotta pot and carefully breaking part of the rim and just setting that out somewhere. Remember that sun and moisture are going to be important for those animals that use that. So, don't put it somewhere where it's going to get a ton of sun exposure. Maybe like a part sun or shade is probably going to be better in that case. But it's also one of those things you can experiment with. Move it around and see who decides to use it. Also, it's important to think about our seasonal needs. So, cover requirement, it varies from fall and winter compared to spring and summer. So, in the fall and winter, a lot of our native pollinators are going into a dormant stage. And so, providing cover that is suitable for that is going to be important. Also, if you live in an area with a lot of, amphibians like this beautiful spotted salamander, they move quite a lot in the early spring to breed. And so providing a safe passage through a healthy leaf layer is one of the ways that you can support those seasonal needs for wildlife. Um, I want to briefly run through two ways to improve cover by being a lazy gardener, some might say. So first is to leave the leaves. A natural leaf layer is super important for the ecosystem. It's a cycling of nutrients. It's uh, a moisture. It's natural mulch that preserves the moisture of the soil. It fertilizes this soil, enriches the soil as it breaks down naturally, and it provides that cover that we're talking about. A lot of wildlife need that cover to hide in and among leaves, and we take those away, we tend to reduce those opportunities. Especially this time of year, the leaf layer provides critical overwintering habitat for a wide variety of insects. This is a beautiful native moth. Also, fireflies need a leaf layer. That's their hunting grounds, their predators. So if you like to see fireflies, you need to preserve a good leaf layer. It also helps you save time and money. So I encourage you to consider leaving the leaves whenever you can. Again, it's not all or nothing. So if you want, you can, kind of corral your leaves, put them in kind of a less visible area. They can still provide that cover while also preserving, the part of your yard they're trying to keep tidy. Um, and if you think about what these leaves are, it's not just leaves, actually, it's a whole ecosystem there. So preserving that ecosystem as much as you can really helps. Part of that could be, if you have a large tree in your yard, use those leaves for that natural mulch layer, is a great way to do that. The next one is to save the stems. Uh, this one is very similar in the fact that it's timely right now, and it is maybe a less conventional management technique for a lot of typical landscaping, but also can provide a lot of interest. So um, the way this works is, this is from the Xerxes Society. This graphic is really helpful. If you've been in the pollinator field for long, you've probably seen it before. But in the winter, it's actually better to leave those stalks intact. The reason is because there are native bees that are going to use the hollow center of those stems to uh, partition their nest with pollen and nectar, and then lay an egg. In the springtime, you can cut those stalks down and allow those insects to, emerge as adults, complete their life cycle. Over the summer, as the new generation of flowers grows, the next generation of pollinators will move in and lay their eggs, start partitioning those. And then in the spring, the cycle begins anew, and you can cut those dead heads down at the time there. If you're doing this with coneflower, purple coneflower, like you see here, it's also a really easy way to reseed your bed. This is a picture of a elderberry stem that I actually collected from my own backyard. And I broke it open, and sure enough, it had this beautiful little assemblage of native bees in there, which was really fun to find myself. So, if this is getting you excited, I encourage you to check out Certified Wildlife Habitat Program. It's a great way to not only inform your neighbors about what you're trying to do and let them know why your yard looks different now. It also is a framework that can help you navigate the process. And when you purchase a sign like this one, or like any of these, a portion of the proceeds goes directly to Arkansas Wildlife Federation to fund our work here in Arkansas. Any of these areas are totally eligible for certified wildlife habitat. So if you are someone that lives in an apartment per se, and you have a small balcony, you can certify that as habitat. You might just have to get a little more creative. But with that said, that concludes my presentation. I hope it's been helpful.